I once asked the boys in the class I was teaching to act what they thought happened in the Garden of Eden. They were 13 years old, most of them about that age. Everybody wanted to play the serpent. It comes fairly easily to us, I suppose. It comes fairly easily to us. I got a few Adams, a couple of Eves, but only one God, which again was as it should be, I suppose. I have forgotten who played what, but I have never forgotten God. He didn't choose to be God. The class selected him. I can see him still, hear him still. He had presented Eve to Adam, and Adam was delighted with Eve, and Eve with Adam. And the audience were enjoying their delight hugely, and were shrieking. Then this young man who was God said, "Now when the laughing's over, I have a few things to say to ye." He then stood Adam and Eve in front of him, did God, and he spoke to them about marriage. He said, "You're to love one another, and that might seem easy now, but it's not that easy. And you're to be nice to one another, and whatever goes wrong, you're to forgive one another, and that's not easy either. And you're to help one another, because if you don't, this world won't work at all." He went on like that for about 5 minutes, and I was open-mouthed in astonishment at this tall, grave-voiced boy, and the class was silent. I'll never forget how he finished. He said, "Well, I'm talking to ye, and ye hear me, and I don't know are ye listening. And I've told you what to do, and I know you won't do it. But sure, maybe you'll do your best. And sure, I'll give you what help I can." Wasn't that remarkable? He later became a doctor. And I was amused a couple of years ago when someone asked me, did I know him? I said yes. And how was he? And this man said, "Great, and he's an extraordinary fellow." He said that when he starts talking, doctors and everybody will gather round to listen. He is very wise, he said, and funny, and he's always good-humoured. None of which surprised me. I don't think he is married yet either. But whenever I think of God and what God is like, I think of him. Not because he is not married. There are a lot of fellows not married who wouldn't make you think of God. No, but because of the wisdom and the understanding that came from him, and a kind of love. I've told you what to do, and I know you won't do it, but sure, maybe you'll do your best, and sure, I'll give ye what help I can. I think that's how God started marriage. with wisdom and understanding and love and a promise of help always. And Christ made it into a sacrament. He made the marriage the sacrament of matrimony. A sacrament. What's that? We use the word easily. We heard it in school. It's a word so worn with us, it slips on the edges of the mind. It slips, if you might say it, on the cogs of the mind. But what is it? Well, do you remember the young man who played God? He promised, "I give ye what help I can." That's part of a sacrament. God's promise to be there to help and to mind when you need. A sacrament is a sign of God with us. The mark of God who accompanies us on life's journey. It's God with us. And in the sacrament of marriage, He is with you every step of the way. Not just the day of the wedding, not just the first year, not just at bad moments, but every day, every minute of every day, until death do us part. And He's there for two reasons. He's there for two reasons. Because marriage needs God. And because God needs marriage. I could put that another way. Because marriage is a difficult vocation. And because marriage is a holy vocation. Marriage is a holy vocation. There is nothing holier, as Christ said, than anybody who has laid down his life for you. Greater love nobody has than to lay down his life for his friend. Your life for your friend. So there's nothing holier than a man who says he's prepared to lay down his life, to give his life for a woman, and for a woman who is prepared to give her life for a man, to lay down her life for a man. That is the very imitation of Christ, in promise and intention anyway. And marriage needs God, because it is a difficult vocation. God knows it's not an easy gift to give. For great generosity does not come cheap. It never comes cheap. It's a promise that can only be made in humility and with a cry for help. And the help of God is there. Marriage needs God's help. Marriage needs God's help. For marriage may be made in heaven, but it has to be lived on earth. On earth, where love and hate wrestle in daily and deadly duel, where men and women find it increasingly difficult to stay forever in marriage. They find it extremely difficult to stay forever in marriage. On earth, where marriage is a state where goodwill is not enough, sexual attraction is not enough, nice guys and dolls are not enough. Not enough to be stronger than human weakness or stubbornness, or the ravages of age or illness, or personalities that change. You know yourselves better than I, better than anyone, that the living ain't easy. It isn't easy, but Christ, really present, makes it possible. Most of the time. Because there will be failures too. But I think God really does say, when it's true, but sure, you did your best. There's failures too, but God did say, He really did say, and when it's true, but sure, you did your best. And God gives thanks for anyone and for everyone who does their best. And when we fail to do our best, He's very good at forgiving. Delighted, said Christ, by anyone who says sorry. I'm talking to ye, and ye hear me, but I don't know, are ye listening? That's what God said. I suppose God saw Adam and Eve as every young couple on their wedding day, thinking about the wedding while He was talking about marriage. And there's a big difference. For wedding is a day, and it's about making promises. And marriage is a lifetime, and it's about keeping promises. And they are easier made than kept. There are triumphs in marriage, and there are tragedies. And we'll say thanks to God, thank God for the triumphs. And we'll say, God forgive us all for the tragedies. The sacrament has thanks in it, and the sacrament has forgiveness in it. And who's to say where the greater grace is? In the triumph or in the tragedy? Christ is in Palm Sunday in triumph, but Christ is in Good Friday too, and even more powerfully present there. And you're to love one another, the young man said, and to forgive one another, and you're to help one another, because if you don't, this world won't work out at all. He said it wasn't easy, and of course it's not. No long journey at close quarters ever is. There is great room and need for the sacrament of mercy in marriage, the mercy of forgiveness, of understanding, of saying something, of saying nothing, The times when you keep your mouth shut and your heart open. So, it's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. No long journey at close quarters ever is easy. So there's great room and need for the sacrament of mercy in marriage. The mercy of forgiveness, the mercy of understanding, of saying something, of saying nothing, the times when you keep your mouth shut and your heart open. Two last things about marriage. The husband and wife are priest to each other and to their children. For a priest is a bridge, and you are the ordinary bridge by which the traffic of God's love flows to your partner. Each of you is meant to be Christ for the other. The Christ you would tend if you saw him beaten by the road. The Christ you would help if you saw him stumble under a cross. The Christ who would tend you, the Christ who would help you. Only Christ is not there. Christ must act through your wife, through your husband. Indeed, a very famous Swiss theologian put it this way when he spoke, and I think wives will like this. He says, God usually speaks to husbands through their wives. The husbands would prefer God to address them directly, but he doesn't. But I'd say he speaks through husbands sometimes too. Finally, marriage is holy. Grace is being given and received by the minute, and in the minute acts and words of daily life. The everyday sacraments are happening in marriage all the time. Marriage is the closest imitation of Christ, because in the pattern of Christ, it is the giving of yourself. It is the giving of yourself for the love of another person, for the love of others. That's not romantic, and it's not easy, but it is Christ-like. There are many mothers and fathers who hardly think of themselves all day. They save and they sacrifice and they give their time, their energy, themselves, their lives, their love for the sake of their children and each other. This is my body, says Christ, which shall be given up for you. The priest says these words in every Mass. But humbly I would say that the great living of them is done by ordinary husbands and wives who think they are very ordinary Christians. No, they're not ordinary. They might be tired. They might be wondering where, how, who, what. They mightn't have time to think. But they're close followers of Christ, and God will never forget it for them. He made marriage and the world for them. And after Christ, he runs and serves the world through married people. That's the way He runs the world through married people. That's why God gives thanks for married people and for their work. And above all, for the way they try. That's the ordinary. But there's the extraordinary too. And I want to leave you with a picture of one of these moments of extraordinary grace. I remember a couple of years ago being at Mass and seeing a woman who, because of illness, could not hold her head erect. But her husband held her head up in the palm of his outstretched hand. It was like an arm stretched out on a cross. And I thought that years before, on their wedding day, he had promised to cherish that beautiful girl, to cherish her in sickness and in health. And I gave thanks to God for what I saw. At the end of the Mass, she smiled at him. It was pure gold. Indeed, it was pure God. For God was certainly present there. That, excuse me, that is a sacrament of matrimony. And may the outstretched hand of Christ hold all those to whom he promised himself in the sacrament of marriage, especially those who find life very hard. And may the outstretched hand of Christ hold up all those to whom he promised himself in the sacrament of marriage, especially those who find life very hard.